If you like mechanical keyboards and you follow Keychron on their social media, you might have seen this video. In this video, I want to break down the behind the scenes of this project into three main chapters: the preparation, the actual animation, and then the editing in DaVinci Resolve. So we're going to go through each of those steps. I'm going to try to give as much detail as I can fit into a YouTube video for how to do this. Hope you enjoy this video. If you get something out of it, please consider liking and subscribing. And with that, let's get into it. Okay, so the first project that we're going to break down is bringing the footage into DaVinci Resolve, which is my video editor of choice. If you use Premiere Pro, you could probably do a lot of these same effects. But we shot this footage. My brother actually helped me with this, and we shot it on a Sony A7, I believe. And so the first step was to just bring in the footage. If I go to my edit tab, you can see I've trimmed this down to just be some of these takes of me placing this keyboard. Basically all I did was set up my desk, cleared all the junk off of it, and then basically set it up to where I knew this was the shot that I wanted. I wanted to have a full shot of the keyboard, and then I knew that I had planned it kind of in a little bit of a storyboard that I wanted to transition from a shot footage of this keyboard and then transition it into a 3D, CGI version out of Blender. So what I did was I basically set up this lighting. I was very conscious about, I have a softbox that's kind of up here in this direction, and then I have one directional bar light across this monitor, which when we get into Blender, I can probably show that. So then the first step was to shoot some footage, and all we did was set up a camera on a really high tripod to get this kind of top down, like orthographic type angle. I think we shot on a 85mm lens. I'm not entirely sure. And so yeah, we basically shot several takes of this, me waving the hand over it, and I had really wanted to get this placement where it was right in the center of this vertical frame. And then the one thing that I will show you is at the very end here, so you can see me plopping in and out. I'm setting up these grids, which I basically aligned at the front edge of my desk, and then what I did after that was I tried to give myself a rough version to bring into fspy. And so this is basically just going to give me, like, I knew that this line here, I could then shoot these horizontal grid lines across, and then that would help me set up this 3D scene in Blender. So yeah, I brought this footage into DaVinci. In the footage, I also, lined up this grid, and then I think I also placed down some color charts at one point, which Alfie Vaughn on YouTube is somebody that I've been really trying to learn from as far as this 3D like CGI type effect of placing CGI elements into real world footage. So yeah, I placed these here, and I think I actually twisted them to where that light wasn't washing them out. This is something I'm still learning more about. But then yeah, once I imported this footage, the real main things that I needed to make this effect was to have obviously the footage, and then when I picked a take that I was happy with, I had a screen grab from this, and then let's go ahead and jump over to the color. So yeah, all I did was bring that in. We shot in Sony S-Log 3, and then using a color space transform node here in DaVinci to just bring that back to a nice output. I think I screwed with the contrast here. I'm gonna set this back to 1. I left this on 1 for the, this is basically what the footage looked like in Blender. And then yeah, I have these other things set up here. I didn't actually do anything with it. This is basically just the raw footage. I really like how this turned out as far as the lighting that we set up. So the only thing that I really needed to get ready to move into fspy and into do Blender was, if you scroll through here, I've obviously got all these takes, and then once I found the take that I was happy with, this was basically going to be like my final, this may not be this position, but I figured out the final spot where I wanted to go, and then I exported out this, and then I also exported out right before it started a piece or a screen grab of this without the keyboard. So basically I have now a blank plate, and then I also have the finalized placement of the one that I actually used. And then yeah, like I said, set up these grids for fspy, and then that's going to let me track or roughly estimate the position of the camera in relation to this desktop. So let's jump from here into fspy, and then we'll actually be back in DaVinci Resolve in the last chapter. So let's move over to fspy to check out those scenes. Okay, so here I am in fspy, and basically you can see I took that screen grab out. It's kind of grayed out. But then basically I just used the X and Y lines and lined them up on this grid, and I just kept playing with it until I could turn off or turn on this. Let's see, that would be the XY grid floor, I think. Nope. This one? Yeah, so basically I just did that until I could move it around, and I felt like the lines were very parallel and matching up with everything. So you see, if I go across the entirety of the front of this desk, this front edge here matches up. And so if I go over here and look, I think you can see, I can't remember, I told it what sensor we were using. It looks like we shot at a 70mm, so it calculated out to be 70.1. So I think we shot on a 70mm lens. So there's going to be a little bit of, error in the way that I set this up. These aren't perfectly straight. This was just me lining them up. All I did was go into, I think it was Canva, and just found a grid that I knew was horizontal and just printed out 4 sheets to give me enough to try to, you know, minimize that error. Looks like I could have done, I think I just used this 1 sheet based on these points, because I think that like trying to line that up perfectly and whatever, I think I stretched them out farther hoping that that would like average out the error. I think it was actually better to just use this one that I knew was lined up really well. So yeah, that was the part of bringing this into fspy. And then once I had this in fspy, I basically had the footage and the 3D scene tracked to where I could then recreate it in Blender. So the next thing that we need to do is look at the CAD data that I got from Keychron. The first thing I did was bring that into plasticity to try to look at that and get it ready to export. So now let's jump over into plasticity. Okay, so here we are in plasticity, and this is the CAD data that I got sent from Keychron as part of this project. So it was super nice to not have to go through and model everything from scratch. If you are interested in learning how to do more modeling inside of Blender, I have a series of videos where we modeled some some work ladder keyboards and some other products from scratch. So thankfully for this project, I didn't have to do that. This is the CAD that they provided for me. I will say there was some issues. I think I can zoom in on this one here. Yeah, so some of these keys had this issue where the CAD data was not working correctly. There was like these gaps in the actual keycaps. And I can't remember, for this project, I might have just left them the way it was. When we get into those future blend files, I have to go back and check it. But yeah, there was some issues. I couldn't really figure out what those were. But then once I did this, I think that this is not going to work the same way, just because I re-imported a version of this. But then all I did was go here to export. You pick a location, we'll just name it 6 or something for fun. And then yeah, I can't remember what the error was for this, maybe because of that. But all I did was export these out. I think I just exported it without the broken keys, and there was a key over here that was the same shape that I could just drag over. Yeah, I think one of these or something. Or I might have even just grabbed one of these keys and then just, you know, cut it in half and brought it over to remake that key. I'm not entirely sure what I did. So yeah, I did that, and then I went through, I selected ngons. I wish I could give you a preview of what it looks like to export out as an ngon. I love plasticity's calculation for quads and ngons. I didn't really care about quads because I wasn't going to be doing any mesh deform or anything like that. So I set mine to ngons. I played with these until I got the amount of geometry around these edges and these bevels that I wanted. And then yeah, once I did that, I exported out of plasticity into Blender, and then that's going to be where we jump next. So let's go over to Blender and look at some of the texturing for the keyboard to recreate this in CGI. Okay, so here we are in Blender. This is where I brought in that CAD that we just exported out from plasticity, and then it was time to do some texturing. So the very first thing I did was they provided this Keychron layout for this keyboard with all the icons, which was so nice not to have to go and recreate these. I've done a lot of different products where you have to go into Photoshop or Canva and, you know, find similar letters or do whatever. So this was so nice to just already have this made. So yeah, all I did was import that, and then it looks like for this texture, let's go ahead and jump into a shader editor here. It looks like all I'm doing is a very simple setup. I just basically took a UV projection. I grabbed all these keys and I UV projected them from the top. And then if I do that, let's just see if I can grab all these keys. They should be in their own keycaps. Yeah. So if I tab in edit mode and then I switch this to a UV editor, all I did was project from view from the top, and then I just lined them up over top. So that was super easy. So yeah, once I did that, I had a mask essentially between black and white, and then I'm just using very simple textures here. This first texture is just a black plasticky material, so it looks like I have the metallic a little bit to give it a little bit more of a dark color. I just played around with this color until I'm matching that reference image that I took out of DaVinci, and then I literally just have a noise texture driving some, so if I preview this, some really small fine grain there driving a normal map that was plugged in, and that's driving the normal. I could have also had that affect the roughness, so that was another option to do. And then yeah, all I did was create a mask. So, you know, look at this image here and then say black is one material, white is the other, with a mixed shader node. And then for this one, very simple. Also, I just picked a white color, set it to metallic. That just helped me to get a little more reflectiveness the way I wanted it to there. So yeah, when I plugged that back in, that's all I did. And then for the, you know, the highlighted color keycaps, all I did was duplicate that material and then change out this color. So if I change this, you could go crazy with whatever that was. Okay. So yeah, then the other piece that was textured on here, a lot of this I just left like a black material. I can't remember what this is. Oh yeah, this is a sandblasted aluminum material from Grayscale Gorilla. And then for these, I literally just took a photo of the side of the keyboard and I projected that onto here. If you zoom in, you can definitely tell how not sharp this is, but then from back here, I actually fed that information into a color ramp for the roughness, and then I also fed that into a bump height for the normal, which is really cool. So actually, let's see if I can preview this. So yeah, I took that into here, and then I previewed this. You can't preview it really as that type of thing. If I plug this into a normal map, maybe I can. Normal map, color, and then I preview this maybe. Still doesn't work, but basically you're using the bump information for that, so it's like a bump map. So yeah, that's how I did that, and then did the same thing where I took another image from the top and then projected that downward, and that just showed this top half. So yeah, that's how I textured the keyboard. And then from there on out, it really just came down to matching the reference image. So if I go back to here, this is what came out of fspy. So if I just put this into x-ray mode, the keyboard isn't exactly lined up right now because I basically created a texturing scene to show you how I textured this model. But then yeah, basically all I did was line this up as closely as I could to this where I placed the keyboard in the final shot. And then it was a matter of just going in here to the wood texture and just tweaking the values of, you know, it looks like this is left the same, but then I messed with the roughness, and then I also just had to kind of set up some of the scene lighting. So yeah, this is the final stage of preparation. We now have gone through how I got the footage, how I took the model through plasticity, how we textured it. We also did the fspy so we can set up our camera. So now we're going to go from chapter 1, which was preparation, into chapter 2, which is the 3D animation. Okay, so here we are inside the Blender setup for the actual animation. So this is the same keyboard that I just showed you in the preparation chapter, and all we're doing now is I brought that in and I've tried to line that up with the camera. So the first thing we're going to look at here is I have a couple cameras. I have one with and without, and I think I had that because of the masks or the way that I was going to render some out with the shadow and some without. But the first thing I want to do here is let's just switch into solid view and see what we got. So basically all I did was model a cube, which is the desk, and if I go to the object data properties, I have shadow catcher enabled. So that basically just means it's only going to bounce light around the scene. It does not going to show up. So when I go into rendered view, you are not seeing any 3D geometry there. So if I just turn that off, you would say, oh, there's something there. You can also see that I applied the texture from the render. So I basically just projected it onto this image. So to do that, I had to, if we go back to solid view, and then if you tab in edit mode, you have to give this a lot of geometry, which you can see this kind of ragged edge. I wasn't showing that in this shot, but then when I do the zoom in on the next shot, you'll see why I did that. So yeah, this was set to shadow catcher so that if I go into rendered view, you're not getting any geometry there. And then if I just move this empty controller around, you can see I'm getting a shadow essentially where the shadow would be coming from. So I can't figure out why I can't see stuff in this viewport, so I'm just going to use this one for now. But just walking through the desk setup, all I did was, like I said, created that cube that lined up from fspy. So then, once I exported out that fspy camera from the preparation stage, it brought it in. If you go look at the camera, it will have the background image that you saved in there. So that's kind of what I was using as the reference. And then yeah, I also set in these two, if I go into x-ray mode, I set these two planes here kind of where my monitors were. And then I think I just adjusted the lighting of each of those. Like this one I gave kind of a gray emission, and then this one I actually ended up, I think, using some orange because I think this light needed some further bounce. Like on my monitor, you can't see it in this image, but I have a little monitor LED bar and it casts a very warm light, which if I go out of x-ray mode, or I think I can go to the camera and then turn up the opacity maybe, or it's already there. I'm not sure how you could see this without seeing everything else, but yeah, if you look at this, there's a very warm light cast here. Even if I go into rendered view, it's probably better. So yeah, there's a light here, and then all I did was recreate that with a little monitor light. It looks like I had the spread set to 150. And then really it was just a matter of setting this keyboard down on top and then masking it, or not masking it, but just messing with the materials and messing with the lighting until it looked correct. The only thing that I will say is that I used for the world, I did create a HDRI with an HDRI app. I think it was like $8, and then I canceled it, or I can't remember what I did. But yeah, I created an HDRI of my desk and the environment to where I could just kind of have some overall, you can see part of my shirt there. It's not a super high quality HDRI, but it did help me get some bounce lighting the way that I would want to. So yeah, I'm using HDRI. It looks like it was set to 1.75, so pretty high strength. If I just turn that off, you can see I'm getting a lot of lighting on this front edge coming from that, so I'm gonna set that back to 1.75. Okay, yeah, so this is the point at which we start getting into the actual animation of what I did. So the very first thing when I had exported this in, if you go look at the product, I've got all these nice collections here where I can specifically grab any piece that I want to. That was a really big help to actually animating this. And then I want to highlight a really awesome tool that I was using specifically for this project. There are tons of ways to do this. Ducky 3D has videos about setting up proximity and setting up geometry nodes. But I believe his name is Manuel. He created this set of tools called B4D, which is basically recreating Cinema 4D, cloner, and effector tools in Blender. And so he has a ton of videos. There's all kinds of stuff you could do with this. You can do these cloners. You can do these really cool effector setups. You can do image texture driving it. There's lots of really cool stuff. So I used that setup, and basically what I did was you take these keys and then you add, if I go over here to the modifier stack, you're gonna see a ton of modifiers. This was quite a extensive list, but basically it's really cool. If I grab one of these effectors, you can see that it is driving the displacement change in the in the Z direction. If I had tried to hand animate that, it would have taken so much longer. So I think I moved it up slightly to where it kind of starts, I think, on that top a little bit before. You can see how there's kind of like a fall off there. So yeah, then all it was I knew that I had wiped my hand over it and that was going to be the transition, but then I wanted to show that this was CGI and try to get scrollers to stop and watch my video. So I wanted something to happen dramatic that wouldn't happen ever in real life. So that was kind of where this inspiration for these keys coming up off the thing came from. One thing that actually really bugs me is it's taking the object origin, and so I really wish that this specific thing, maybe I could have done a shape key and twisted it or something. So yeah, all I did was keyframe these controllers. So basically, again, the workflow for that, I probably won't have time to do a full tutorial on how to set all this up, but basically you create a dummy object and then you give it a B cloner. Let's see here, I think it's I can't remember. I can look at the modifier stack and tell you. So if I click on this, B fracture, there's a B fracture here, which is here, I believe. Yeah, B fracture, which basically allows you to select individual objects. And then I gave it a couple of basic fields, so it just creates this nice little visual graph of if I go to the front view, you can see this is where the effect starts happening. I gave it a very soft fall off. This is where it's the highest, and then it comes back from there. So yeah, then I animated this this nice rising effect with this, and then I didn't do any camera zoom. So in the final edit, and I may put it up here, I may just reference it later, I just zoomed the overall camera in. I shot this in 4K, and so I could zoom in pretty high into the setup without changing anything. So I actually just left this as it was. I didn't have any camera movement. So yeah, that was the first scene. It was just a matter of setting this keyboard, once it matched all the texture and the lighting. Let me just double check if there's anything about the lighting I wanted to talk about. So yeah, I have this, looks like I had another light up here referencing the softbox light that I have at my desk. I had this light replicating that monitor light coming down, and it literally was just a matter of me sitting in here and tweaking these, and then turning this whole collection on and off in rendered mode, and then just comparing it. And then the other thing that I will say is you can see that I have these indirect options here. Sorry, I can talk. If I go to product and I just turn that on, and you have to do it for all of these like this, and then I think I also have to do it for this one with the keys as well. And it's not showing up here. Let me think of what I'm doing wrong. Product, if I turn the product off. Okay, yeah, because this is the video, I think, or here. Where is that one? Here. Okay, yeah. So if you turn all these off, you're just going to be essentially getting the shadows, and it's hard to see because of this here, but basically indirect only allows it to calculate how it affects the real world, not actually showing up as a render. So I have multiple different shots here that I did. This is very nicely organized. But I rendered a lot of these out, and when I rendered them in 2 separate layers. I rendered just the 3D, so no shadows at all, and then I turned all the 3D off and I rendered just the shadows. And then I'll show you in the final chapter how I edited that together. So let's move to shot 2. Okay, so here in shot 2, this shot differs in a couple ways. I'm not doing anything with B4D in this specific shot. This was just hand animated. And so basically I have let's go into solid view here. For this one, I have a camera and it's parented to an empty, so I'm just rotating the camera in slightly, and I'm also scaling down to where it's zooming in, so that's kind of what gives you that effect. And then I just grabbed one of these keys and gave it a little empty controller, and then same thing with the button that I pressed in. This was just all hand animated, so if I go to the graph editor, you can grab all these things and you could look at all the keyframes. here. It wasn't too many. Like I said, it was all hand animated, and it's just a matter of lining these up to match the type of motion that I wanted. So we're gonna go back out, and then for this one, two really cool things. Number one, I rendered these at 4K, I think, yeah, so HD at 200%. And the reason that I did that is because I think that you get a lot more details on this transmissive material, and like honestly, the material of the side of the wood, this is all 3D. And this held up super well. This lighting held up super well, and then this texture, this is literally just the image from that 4K image of the desk being projected onto this sorry, I just had to check my thing, onto this desk. And so all I did was keyframe all that. So if I go into solid view here, click that, yeah, just a nice little zoom in that pops in. One thing that I've been learning from Sweet Boy Motion, my buddy Elijah, is the principles of animation, and so I wanted there to be some weight. So once that pressed down, you know, it had some momentum, and it kind of like gave this really nice movement here. I think that's one thing that I see in a lot of animations that stand apart to me as being more premium, is there's some sense of animation principles behind the actual motion. Like a lot of, you know, animations that you might see from people starting early on might just have that go click in a very linear motion. But using easing and making that feel organic and real was a big part of how I liked how the shot turned out. So yeah, same thing. This is the same setup. I rendered it at 4K. I think I actually just left this shot the way it was. I don't think I rendered in separate layers. I just rendered that as is. So now let's take a peek at shot 3. Okay, so in shot 3, the exact same thing. I did the similar effect using the Cinema 4D tools, or the B4D tools by our buddy Manuel. Feel free to go grab his thing from the screenshot that I shared earlier from on Google. So yeah, all I did here was the exact same trick. I'm using another setup where I basically have selected all of these little the magnetic actuators, and then running another setup. It is pretty complicated, or like it's pretty heavy, because I think it's basically taking all these pieces, and they all have a fair bit of geometry, so this doesn't play back super smoothly, but I didn't have any issues with rendering. And then there's also a really cool effect where if you do this, you can go into the I don't know where it is, I referenced it in the shader, but there is essentially in the manage section, I think, named attributes, you can call the amount of displacement that's being shown. And so what I did was in the shader editor for some of those, let's see, if I change this to object, let me go back, and then let's hide this. And then basically what I did was I just spawned in a bunch of these little LEDs that I added in. And so if I go to the shader editor, I'm calling that effector fall off from the actual add-on, and then I'm, you know, setting that material for those based on that. And what that did was it let me drive the lights being turned on by the amount of displacement that was going. So that was a really cool setup. Manuel was super cool. Yeah, I actually messaged him and he kind of helped me walk through some of that. So yeah, I'm gonna turn these back on, or I can't remember how I turn those on. Let's just do Control Z, Control Z. Okay, there we go. So yeah, again, another basic setup. The same lighting, same materials, same scene. And all I did was set another keyframe or another scene here where these, you know, pressed in, the keys light up, and then the camera animated back out. And then let's take a look at shot 4. Okay, so shot 4 is, I think this is the shot with it just coming up and rotating. And then I think, oh yeah, I basically split shot 4 and shot 5 into 2 different things, one with the keyframes and one without. I could have just rendered this halfway, but I think I just stopped it at frame 57. And then if you go to shot 5, it basically picks up with frame 57. So probably not the best way to do it. But honestly, this is a good example to show you with everything selected to indirect only. That then means that it's only going to, you know, calculate the shadows. And one thing that I did want to point out is if you are doing these shadow passes, when you are trying to denoise this image, I always turn the denoiser off for this. I have noticed that the Blender, especially, I don't know if it's just an optics thing, but it definitely clips and takes away a lot of your shadow values when you're trying to denoise just a shadow image. So anytime I'm rendering like a product image, I'll make sure to turn denoising off for that. So yeah, I did render out multiple different setups for that. And then if you go look, this is just the animation. You can see all the way back from the beginning. If I just set this back to 0 like this, and then go to the beginning. All it did was the keyboard pops up off the desk, did this nice little spin to get the keys back, and then just moved off camera. And then I knew that I was going to be using the same plate from the first shot to where, you know, they would basically loop. I wanted it to be a looping video for social media. So yeah, that's basically the entirety of the walkthrough for the lighting, for the animation. So now we're going to jump into chapter 3, which is going to be a quick breakdown of the editing in DaVinci Resolve and putting all this together. Okay, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve. I had that backplate set up. I've rendered out all these passes from Blender. We've got some of them that are just straight up image sequences. Then we have some that we did as PNGs to where there's just the product, and then we're gonna label that in. So this is the entire, I'm gonna drag this up. This is the entire edit. This is my sound design that I did. It's very simple. This was a relatively short project. I grabbed this from Envato Elements. They have been one of my favorite suppliers for types of creative music and photos and stuff. So I think I grabbed that track from there. And then I think some of these assets were from Soundly, which is a really cool freemium software for grabbing sound effects. And then let's just go ahead and break this down from top to bottom. This right here, I think this is just, I added some overall effects. So if I go to the effects tab over here, this just applies to everything below it. So if you go over here to, let's see how that is. If you go to effects and then you just search for a adjustment clip, and I think it's in generators, where is it at? Yeah, it's in effects. So basically all this does is it applies to anything below it. So you'll see I'm using one here. This is actually the one that zooms the camera in for this shot and zooms all the way in to here. And then this one right here, I just added a couple of effects. I added a film grain slightly, and then this little bit of glow, which honestly, it really changed a lot. If I go here, you can see you get this nice little highlight that's added in. It helps this not feel so flat. So yeah, I'm using an adjustment clip with film grain and glow from the top, and then the next thing down is just this one, which is set to the it just changes the scale, the zoom in. Like I said, I didn't actually zoom the camera in because I was limited to, I didn't want to have camera movement, because then I couldn't really, I'd have to 3D track this scene. It would have added so much work to this. So I kept a stationary camera, and then I basically just, you know, optically zoomed in to a 4K frame here. Okay, so then the actual masking effect is really simple. So all I have here is, if you look at this clip here, this is just the footage. So if I go back to this point, well, actually it's going to be, this right here is a track of my hand. So if I turn this off, I think, let me just double check. When I get to this point, yeah. So right now you'll see, now I have this right here is basically the mask for the 2 layers that I have. And so all I did was, if you go into the, let's go see if I can find it. I think it's gonna be this one. If you go into Fusion or into Color. Okay, so yeah, this is the piece that we used for the actual mask. So it's this little piece right here, and all I'm doing is adding an alpha output. And all I did to do that was to go to the footage, you add a serial node, you're gonna right click and do this add alpha output. All I did was just add a node for this magic mask. And if you select this, I just went to a spot in the keyframe where the magic mask, which is here, and then all I did was track it forward and backward. It was so easy the way that it grabbed onto my hands. It actually tracked both of them in and out, and I did it the first try. So DaVinci has some super good, I think it's also AI boosted, but yeah, basically I tracked my hands to where I could then have an alpha overlay, and then I just placed it over top of the footage so that when I masked between one and the other, as my hand went across, I was, you know, going from showing the original footage to adding in this overlay. So if I go back to the edit, this right here is the mask, and then, you know, I have essentially 2 pieces of footage here. This is the actual 3D, or that, and then up here is where it transitions to, you know, now showing this the actual keyboard here. And you will see that if you like zoomed in here, this is the original keyboard, and then this is what, let's go put this back, this is what mine looked like. So you can see that there was some actual differences. Mine definitely should have had more light in this area, but it's honestly very convincing before and after. You can also see it looks like the keys had a little bit warmer of a touch on them before. I'm gonna bring this down so you can see better. The keys definitely had a slightly warmer hue, and I tried a bunch of different things to fix that. I messed with the white balance in Blender, and I tried to just warm them up in, you know, the color tab. But honestly, I got to the point where it was close enough, and because you're this far out and you're getting a wave, you're really not seeing too much. But I do think that there is still, you know, if I had time to go back and do this, I would probably go back and try to edit that. So yeah, that was the simple little transition effect. I basically just have a mask that transitions between the original footage and then the 3D sequence that I did. And then yeah, moving to shot 2, this is just the render straight out of, and it plays so slow, so I'm probably not going to be able to play it well here, but this is just the 4K images straight out of Blender. Same thing here, images straight out of Blender. And then when I get to this point, I basically have, you can see I've got the shots that I rendered multiple times and overlaid based on some changes I made. But then I have just the shadow layers for both of those. And then I think I can just adjust, like, yeah, I have the opacity turned down for these. I think I have it set to 75. So yeah, that was the overall editing. And then I just went through and made sure that I was happy with the compositing. And then I did those final little tweaks of doing the zoom in. I have these 2 adjustment clips here that are doing the zoom in and the zoom out to where they kind of make sure that they loop. And then, yeah, like I said, already had these effects with some nice film grain and some glow there. So this is the final effect. I'm going to replay the final video, and then after that we'll do outro.